Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for another edition of the Free Exchange of Ideas with Donovan and John. We are here to help you out. Now, let's just get to it.
Okay. Thank you again for coming back to another episode of the Free Exchange of Ideas with Donovan and John. Today, we are going to talk about the First Amendment, and we're going to break it down a little bit and probably do a second show, because today I'm going to talk about freedom of religion and how it's framed in the First Amendment, and Donovan is going to talk about, which I believe is the second clause, freedom of speech. And they are tied very, very tightly, but there are a lot of things that we can discuss without really touching each other. So I'm going to go ahead and start. The First Amendment of the first, the first part of the First Amendment is, the First Amendment guarantees freedoms concerning religion, expression, assembly, and the right to petition. It forbids Congress from both promoting one religion over others and also restricting an individual's religious practices. And I have questions about that because I'm not certain how encompassing that is. But it also guarantees freedom of expression by prohibiting Congress from restricting the press, or the rights of individuals to speak freely. It also guarantees the rights of citizens to assemble peaceably and petition their government. Now, part of prohibiting being able to say pretty much whatever you want, it also allows for you to not say anything. Unlike the Fifth Amendment, it says in the First Amendment, it's very clear in several Supreme Court cases that no one can force you to say something. So in a particular case that I know that Donovan is going to talk about, the gentleman on his license plate, there was something on his license plate, he didn't like it, he put a cover over it, and although the license plate could still be read, that portion of it could not. And he had to go all the way to the Supreme Court to get his rights enunciated, I guess is what it was, and corroborated. So I know Donovan's going to talk about that, but I'm going to go ahead and go first. And so this is Amendment 1 of the Bill of Rights. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government. I can speak normally. Petition the government for a redress of grievances. And that's it. That's the full text of the First Amendment. So I'm going to talk about the first part of that, which is the freedom of religion. This first part is called the Establishment Clause, CLAUSE, not Santa. And it's a Establishment Clause prohibits the government from making any law respecting establishment of religion. Now, this is a direct shot across the bow of the King of England. The King Henry VIII created the Church of England so that he didn't have to kill his wives, he could divorce them, because the Pope would not allow him to get divorced. So he created the Church of England, and the Protestants and Catholics didn't want to go to the Church of England, and it was required that they go to the Church of England. So the framers decided that's really not very good. So they said, this is what's going to happen. We're not going to do that. And that's part of the Establishment Clause. It's not a separation from church and state, but a separation of church and state, in that the state cannot prohibit or make exclusion to any religion, period. And that's the end of that sentence. And that's really, really important, especially in the last, I'm going to say 20 plus years, because we have Buddhists and Hindus and Protestants and Catholics and atheists. And yeah, absolutely. And so the government cannot promote as part of the government a particular religion. Neither can they denounce any particular religion, as it is recognized. Because I know that they have denounced a few people, but not a particular religion, like Jim Jones. They denounced him because he was practicing a weird form of, let's just call it Christianity, for lack of a better term. I know I'm going to get hell from Christians for that, but I'm just saying, for lack of a better term.
I just want to throw in there really quick too. One of the things
Absolutely.
you probably not know about the Jim Jones was a lot of his followers were foster care, former foster care people in foster care, and he was taking their money.
He was a hunter.
Yep.
The same as a rapist, or generally men who hunt for some type of pleasure, not necessarily animals, hunt other humans. And yeah, he was absolutely a hunter in that manner, in that regard. Yeah, winner. Anyway, so and yeah, folks who have been in that system tend to either be super closed off to other people, or they're open, looking for that connection that they didn't get in the system, and they're easy to find, unfortunately, for the Jim Jones kind of people. So, a little bit of a tangent, but a good tangent, I'm going to say.
Connected last week.
Yeah. It also forbids the government from establishing official religion. Sorry about that. Also prohibits government actions unduly favoring one religion over another, or no religion at all, or favoring religion over non-religion, or non-religion over religion. So, in the eyes of the government, an atheist, a Hindu, and a Christian are equal. They are able to do their civic thing either as an atheist or a Hindu, Muslim, doesn't really matter. But you're able to follow the tenets of your religion or non-religion as you feel. And that's important. I think that's important because it recognizes immediately in the first couple of sentences that we are all equal, but don't all believe the same thing. And that's okay. That's really important right now, I think, that we recognize that. Not just because it's written in our founding documents, but because it's the human thing to do, in my opinion. There are several cases that I want to discuss real quickly. Oops, that was the wrong button. Sorry about that. Should still be open. There it is. The Supreme Court has permitted religious invocations to open legislative sessions, public funds to be used for private religious school busing and textbooks, and university funds to be used to print and publish student religious groups' publications. I'm not really sure why that was even up there, because it seems like that would be a freedom of press rather than a freedom of religion. But conversely, the court has ruled against some overtly religious displays at courthouses, state funding, supplementing teacher salaries at religious schools, and some overly religious holiday decorations on public land. There's a case that they discuss in here. Actually, I want to talk about that one because it's a good one. It's this one, Salazar versus Buono. This is 2009. I thought it was earlier than that. In 1934, a VFW group had placed a large, what they called a Roman cross on federal land in the Mojave National Preserve to honor American soldiers who died in World War I. Claiming to be offended by a religious symbol's presence on federal land, responded Buono. He was the guy who things where the government appeared to be, or was, like I said, directly involved with or owned pieces of, like the court cases for 10 Commandments on courthouse grounds. He brought the case. He's a regular visitor to the preserve, filed this suit alleging a violation of the First Amendment's Establishment Clause and seeking an injunction requiring the government to remove the cross. The district court agreed with him, and what the government did was trade land from the Mojave Desert where the cross was for land that they had owned in a different part of the park, and thereby swapping to make that a private piece of land where the First Amendment wouldn't apply, because in the First Amendment, it only applies to, at the time, I mean, I'm sorry, not at the time, but only applies to government issuing things. So like if you were to, actually, there's a really good case in here too about, so the court found that Buono had standing to sue and concluded that the federal land conveyed an impression of governmental endorsement. And that's what they're talking about. It has to look like or be actual governmental, either direction or physical land has to be owned by the government. In California, the federal government is the largest landowner, just to let you know what California looks like. So when doing the swap, they thought they could get away with just, that's it, we're done, we're good. They went to Buono, said, no, that's not good for me, because it's still part of the process. And it was a governmental transfer, so it still relied on the government doing something to fix it. And so they went to court again, and then the Ninth Circuit agreed with Buono again and said, no, that you can't do that. The government can't do that, can't just swap the land. This is federal land, period. And you can't just swap the land to fix your problem. And from there, the government sued and went up to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, no, we're going to kick it back down to the ninth, and that makes the ninth's decision stand. So that's what happened there. They eventually had to tear that cross down, I think, and they moved it to wherever their land was, I guess. I don't recall what the disposition of the cross was, but they did have to move it. And so that's another thing about freedom of religion. Freedom, they took it as freedom from religion, I think, in that he didn't feel it was fair that the government was saying, in essence, it's okay, this is a Christian cross and we are supporting Christians. And that's the way it went through the court system. There are several other court cases not like that, but in the sense that they talked about those kinds of, that was McCreary County versus ACLU. In that case, the Supreme Court did not articulate a clear general standard for defining these types of cases. And that's where we get into foggy ground in that. There were 2 or 3 cases like that. One of them actually, in the district court, they were found against the government, and the government entity there said, no, these are foundational documents, foundational statements of our legal system. And they promoted a bunch of founders documents and arguments for and against in their display with the 10 Commandments. That one actually went all the way up to the Supreme Court and was found to be legal. They found it to be okay. And I'm sorry, I can't find that case right off the top of my head. Free exercise clause. You got to catch me on this, Donovan. I'm going to be bouncing a little bit, I think. The free exercise clause reserves the right.
As you're talking.
Okay. The free exercise clause reserves the right of American citizens to accept any religious belief and engage in religious rituals. Free exercise clauses of state constitutions, which protected religious quote unquote opinion, expression of opinion, and practice, were all expressly protected, end quote, by the free exercise clause. The clause protects not just religious beliefs, but actions made on behalf of those beliefs. And this is where I kind of get a little muddy, and I won't go into that right now because it's very muddy. Pardon me. The clause protects not just religious beliefs, but actions. More importantly, the wording of state constitutions suggests the free exercise envisions religiously compelled exemptions from at least some general applicable laws. The free exercise clause not only protects religious belief and expression, it also seems to allow for violations of laws as long as that violation is made for religious reasons. In the terms of economic theory, the free exercise clause promotes a free religious market by precluding taxation of religious activities by minorities by minority sects, SECTS, sex, not the other one. I want to read this. This is really small print, so be good with me. Constitutional scholars and even Supreme Court opinions have contended that the two religious clauses are in conflict. The Establishment Clause and this one. As mentioned previously, the Free Exercise Clause, I'm going to say exchange a lot, I apologize, implies special accommodation for religious ideas and actions, even to the point of exemptions to generally applicable laws, such as special benefit to violate the neutrality between religion and non-religion mandated by the Establishment Clause. If there is a constitutional requirement, quote, if there is a constitutional requirement for accommodation of religious conduct, it will most likely be found in the Free Exercise Clause. Some say, though, end quote, some say, though, that it is a violation of the Establishment Clause for the government to give any special benefit or recognition of religion. In that case, we have a First Amendment in conflict with itself. The Establishment Clause forbidding what the Free Exercise Clause requires. So these are big things. I'm not really going to go any deeper into this because there is a lot to talk about. Honestly, we could do 5 shows on just that. I want you to look this up because it's truly important. And look up why the 14th Amendment is so important to the First Amendment. Also important. And the 14th Amendment has 5 clauses, but they're very, very small. You can read them very quickly and then look them up. I'm using Cornell Law School's EDU site to get this information. Use that. I will actually put that in there so that you can just follow it directly to this site and honestly learn about this because it's truly your right. And if you don't know it, you can't support it, you can't defend it, and you can't use it. Donovan?
How's it going, guys? So, and did you say it was adopted on December 15th, 1791?
We did not say the date. It was for all of them.
Yep. So yeah, December 15th, 1791. It was adopted as one of the 10 amendments that constitute the Bill of Rights for the United States. So I really want to focus on, I guess, what's important to me. And I'm gonna mention a little bit, though a lot more, well, I guess not maybe a lot more, I was looking at freedom of the press, because freedom of the press and I think freedom of speech are very closely related.
And absolutely.
And one of them is much more, I guess, regulated than the other to some degree. Freedom of the press, that is. Yeah, freedom of speech in the United States. Freedom of speech and expression, strongly protected from government restrictions by the First Amendment here in the U.S. Many state constitutions and the state and federal laws bar restrictions from government on all those. Also called freedom of speech, also called free speech, means the free and public expression of opinions without censorship, interference, and restraint by the government. The term freedom of speech embedded in the First Amendment encompasses the decision what to say as well as what not to say. The Supreme Court of the United States has recognized several categories of speech that are given lesser or no protection by the First Amendment, and has recognized that governments may enact reasonable time, place, or manner restrictions on speech. The First Amendment's constitutional right of free speech, which is applicable to state and local governments under the incorporation doctrine, which I think was the 14th Amendment, right?
Yes.
Prevents only government restrictions on speech, not restrictions imposed by private individuals or businesses, unless they are acting on behalf of the government. Pull this up a little bit more so I can read it. However, laws may restrict the ability of private businesses and individuals from restricting the speech of others, such as employment laws that restrict employers' abilities to prevent employees from disclosing their salary to coworkers or attempting to organize a labor union.
Or medical information.
Yep, that's another one. The First Amendment's freedom of speech right not only prescribes most government restrictions on the content of speech and ability to speak, but also protects the right to receive information, prohibits most government restrictions or burdens that discriminate between speakers, restricts the tort liability of individuals for certain speech, and prevents the government from requiring individuals and corporations to speak or finance certain types of speech with which they do not agree. Categories, here's the one I thought was interesting. Categories of speech that are given lesser or no protection by the First Amendment include obscenity, as determined by the Miller test, fraud, child pornography, speech integral to illegal conduct, speech that incites imminent lawless action, and regulation of commercial speech such as advertising. Within these limited areas, other limitations on free speech balance rights to free speech and other rights, such as the rights of authors over the works, copyright, parentheses, protection from imminent or potential violence against particular persons, restrictions on the use of untruths to harm others, slander and libel would be those two, and communications while a person is in prison. When a speech restriction is challenged in court, it is presumed invalid and the government bears the burden of convincing the court that the restriction is constitutional. So yeah, I thought that was and someone who got his degree in public relations, mass communications. It's been a good 20 odd years since I've even looked at the First Amendment. So it was good to kind of read up on it again and to learn, I mean, relearn it. I guess it's been so long, and something like I'm sure me and John just kind of like take for granted to some degree. You know, it's kind of like freedom of speech. What does that entail? You know, the government cannot restrict your you know,
Ability.
right to say what you want to say. I guess, you know, within reason to some degree, you know.
Right.
But it's and my other big one was freedom of press, which I think is closely related to freedom of speech, because they are definitely, as me and John were saying earlier, and how that and the freedom of press, as much as the freedom of speech has gotten many, I guess, lawsuits that went through the system, the judicial system, freedom of press was always one that's been interesting to me. There are many, many suits that went up to all the way to the Supreme Court for freedom of the press. And still from the 19th century up until 21st century. So I am not going to go through those, but I will definitely put a link in there.
But I did want to talk about one that I just find fascinating: fighting words. Fighting words are restricted a great deal. And as first defined by the Supreme Court in Chaplinsky v. New Hampshire, 1942. So I think it's about the time also that they did, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater kind of thing.
Yeah.
But in this one, it says words which by their very utterance inflict injury or tend to incite an immediate breach of the peace. In other words, if I walked up to Donovan and said, "Let's get some, brother," and he went, I have incited him and he has breached the peace by attacking me. And I fully expect him to do it, except he's too short.
Pop you the kneecap.
Right. But it has been well observed that such utterances are no essential part of any exposition of ideas and are of such slight social value as a step to truth that any benefit that may be derived from them is clearly outweighed by the social interest in order and morality. End quote.
Yeah, I was actually just from this up.
Yeah, that's straight from Supreme Court.
They narrowed it though here in 1949, Terminiello versus Chicago. Supreme Court narrowed the scope of what constitutes fighting words. The court found that words which produce a clear and present danger are unprotected and are considered fighting words, but words which invite dispute and cause unrest are protected and are not considered fighting words. Huh, so, interesting.
In that, but in that vein, if say I worked with somebody who was born a man and has transitioned to a woman, and I continue to call her a male or by her given name, her name on her birth certificate, then I would be breaching the peace, because that's just beyond rude. And I know that actually has been through the California court system on more than one occasion recently. So
yeah,
I only use that as an example. I have never done that to anyone to my knowledge, and I would not if I am knowledgeable of the situation. That's my mea culpa right there.
Yeah. So one of my best friends, I will not name him, was arrested for inciting a riot.
Well, was he convicted? Always big
He
numbers.
was not convicted, but he was arrested. I won't name him on here, but yeah, I'm like, dude, I'm a little bit jealous.
I'm sure he appreciates you refraining. But there you go. There's a couple of high points of the First Amendment. And again, like we say all the time, please do your own research. Don't take our word for everything, because we are not scholars. The only one with a real degree, and honestly, it's in advertising. So
it's not mass communications.
Mass communications, advertising. So, but we really want you to. We bring this to your attention only to get you to think, and do some self elucidation. Really, you don't have to get into the weeds in this thing. I mean, we didn't, but we understand much better what the limitations are of this section, of these two sections, I should say, and what our actual right in these two sections is. And that's important to note before you get in an argument with a police officer about what your rights are. And to quote a lot of First Amendment auditors on YouTube, you can beat the rap, but you can't beat the ride. So yeah, arguing with an officer is never a good idea.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what goes on, particularly today, with the polarization of politics in this country, and obviously the domination of social media, and people, you have the right to say, as we were just discussing, within reason, I guess, depending on what you're doing, where you're at, whatever you want to say, but you're also, you're liable for what you say too, right? So the consequences of what you say, there are consequences for things that you say. For instance,
absolutely,
you can't, if you yell fire in a theater, you're going to get arrested.
And you'll probably do a little bit of time on that one. But yeah, I did want to say just real quickly, because this kind of applies to the fight that is going on between people, the people, and social media, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, where you don't really have a right to free speech because it's not a government entity. That is the only reason. Because it's a private entity, they can do pretty much as they wish, unless you can find a connection back to the government where there is some form of direction, request, or they're doing the bidding of. At that point, it becomes a government thing, and it becomes a whole different ball of wax. But until those connections are made, they can do as they wish, and that's important to recognize. I as a conservative, I fully expect that some of my speech is going to be remanded to the trash heap before most of my followers read it or see it. And I've been smacked by Facebook a couple of times, not hard, but it happens because I said something that evidently I shouldn't have said. So just to saying that.
Talk after the show, me and you.
Yeah, and that's the other thing, is being careful here so that we can continue to bring you this kind of content without being edited by. We do self-editing, obviously, but without being edited by the man, in essence.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see. I mean, because I see where you're coming from, and I am totally a huge supporter, backer of freedom of speech. But I also think that, spreading misinformation to the public, if entities were doing that, we would expect some kind of retaliation against them, right? So what happens then when people start doing it, and it gets all sticky, right? And this is one of those instances where technology far outpaces the law, right?
Absolutely.
So that's kind of where, and and that's kind of where we're at, and so, it's happened in the past, soon as they invented the printing press, there was no constitution or United States back at that point, but the other countries that are dealing with that, all this information, pamphlets during the revolution and things like that, that's all, that I guess I'd say helpful, even the printing of the Bible and leaflets to inform people what's going on. Here's what's happening at the Capitol, right? Or listening to those people. A lot of people couldn't read, right? Here's a pamphlet. What the hell am I gonna do with this? So they had speakers reading those pamphlets out in public, in the public square. Here's what's going on. And what if those people were lying, right? What happens when those people are out there doing this thing and talking to the public and giving them wrong information, right? So what happens? I am not a constitutional scholar by any means, and I look at one of the interesting things I learned is that the United States has the oldest constitution in use right now in the world, which I find interesting.
Inconsistent use.
Consistent use. So we have the oldest constitution, and as now as we are in the 20th century, and we look back at the 18th century when the founding fathers wrote this document, it's interesting to see, why, and they made it. Obviously, there are amendments, so there's a way to change it. So they put that, they wrote that in there. So it's interesting to see us as this beacon of democracy, and obviously the Constitution wasn't perfect, which is why we have amendments for it. So I think there's, we need to start looking at it not as a, how shall I say, this untouchable document. And it's obviously been touched. It's been touched many, many times, and there are many amendments to this, and people, the Supreme Court has, used the Constitution to honestly, hurt other people in the United States. Three-fifths amendment, things such as that. So, I mean, obviously, the Constitution is not infallible.
Three-fifths, counting Black people as they came out of slavery as 3/5 of a person, and that's actually really important because in the 14th Amendment, there is the way it's written is it gives them full citizenship, so they are counted as one. But it's really important to read the entire thing because when they wrote it, and we have not, that amendment hasn't been modified specifically. I think there's two amendments further down that modify this particular section. In the 14th Amendment, it says men are counted as citizens. Black men are counted as citizens, but it never says anything about women or children, and they aren't counted in the census. So when they write names down, if it's a child or a woman, it's not, the counters don't tally that. They only tally men. And at the same time, only men could vote. Only landowners could vote. And they had to be men. White men, that's right. Because there were women landowners at the time and there were Black landowners at the time. And neither one of them had the vote. So we have grown as a nation. I think we have grown as people as well. And
as a society.
As a society, absolutely. And I think if we look around the world, I think we are as close to 50 or 60% better than most of the nations on the planet in our rights and how we observe those rights and use those rights.
And one of the things I sent you one of that one podcast, and it talks about, and you said you couldn't listen to it, but it talks about how the United States Constitution is based a lot on negative rights and not positive rights. Because I still want to learn. I don't know everything, and I definitely, I mean, I barely read our Constitution, let alone some other country's Constitution.
Absolutely. Please, one, hit that like button. Do it now because we're almost done. Hit the subscribe button. We are going to do a lot of stuff on the Constitution, from the independent bill, from the Declaration of Independence all the way through to the 24th Amendment or 20. Yeah, there's 24 amendments now, right? You looked at it, didn't you? No, I'm kidding.
I
Um,
was just looking at numbers.
yeah, this is like the first thing. But yeah, I think there's either 22 or 24, 25, somewhere in there. We'll confirm that before next week. Oh, Don is going to do it now. And you didn't send me the other case that you're talking about. You only sent me the one accidental guardians.
Yeah.
So if you find
I'll
it, send
send
it
it
to me.
again. I'll send
Yeah.
it to you again. You said you couldn't listen to it.
I'm
It was a good-
no,
it was a good
the one I couldn't listen to was accidental guardian. That's the only one you sent me. The thing you sent me
Oh,
before that was the flying chainsaw, which by the way is an
Alright.
airplane, not a trick.
I like to think I have a pretty good collection of reference books that I keep by my bed. Dictionary, I got a quotitionary, I got book of speeches. Yeah, I got everything like that. So
Nice.
AP book. Yeah, so I got all that stuff there.
It's AP.
But AP
Advanced
Associated
Politics?
Press. Associated Press handbook
I see. So
for
articles.
writing, yeah.
Oh,
So-
nice. I have a Stephen King on writing. Does that count?
Sure.
Anyway, hey, thanks again for listening. We truly, truly appreciate this more than you will ever know. All 6 of you or 8 of you now, I think. Hey, tell your friends, because I would really like to see us get to 1,000 before the end of next year. So anyway, thank you very much. Have a fantastic day, and see ya.
Peace, love, and soul, people.
Well, I'm Donovan, and John's here with us today. Thank you for joining us for the free exchange of ideas, and we'll see you next time on the next show. See ya!